Welcome back to the SportsLine Model Show. I am your host, Mackenzie Brooks. We had a great weekend last weekend. We have some more picks for you just to get the look ahead for this week in the NFL, in college football, some MLB. But before we look forward, let's take a look back from Friday's prop show. Another profitable week for the team, 6-4 on both college and the NFL. And if honestly, a lot of these were by close margins, which is frustrating, but it means we're thinking the right way. The data is doing what the data is supposed to be doing. So I like that for the team. Let's bring in the stars of the show. A lot of us coming off some highs, some of us coming off some lows. Derek, I'd like to just apologize from the team about losing Nick Chubb. I know that has to hurt a lot.
Yeah, losing Nick Chubb, he's had over 54% of the rushing yards. That's what he's responsible for the Browns. So that's a major part of the offense. But we also have now Ford, who comes in. He rushed for over 100 yards yesterday. He had that massive 69-yard rush in the game. So we have, yes, we are down about Chubb, losing Chubb. But Ford, from far as what I hear, they're going to stick with him. So that means all of these people talking about, let's go after Taylor. That's probably not happening, especially with this front office of the Browns.
Right. Steven? I mean, the jersey says it all. How are we feeling?
I think the most interesting thing was with Burrow's injury issues and the Bengals 0-2 start, the Browns Super Bowl odds went from around plus 1,800 to plus 2,800. This was on Caesars. I think a loss ordinarily would have taken them down to maybe plus 2,200, but the injury accounts for the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed the Ravens division odds went from like plus 115 to minus 105. And the Steelers division odds improved significantly too. So those are the two teams that obviously benefit the most from the Chubb injury.
Right. And how about your Ravens?
Did this give you the impression? It's obnoxious, right? I shouldn't brag in front of Derek about that. This is a little less subtle.
Double?
I'm itching my foot. I'm itching my foot. I'm afraid. So sorry about that.
Not
Derek.
ready for that. Wow. All right. And of course, Jake with a big Florida win over Tennessee too.
Yeah, it was nice to get a win. I mean, it definitely helps Napier with his job stability. It's nice because a lot of the young guys showed out, but the problem was the Jaguars followed up with a tough loss the next day, so can't win everything.
Right. Okay, so let's move. Before we get into our picks, we've been doing the show for more than a few weeks now, almost 2 months. We've been keeping track of our bets because we are numbers people, and that is just naturally what we do. So I want to run you guys through these quick. This is from our whole show record. Definitely profitable, as you see, 74-57, 13-10 on NFL, MLB 36-31. Again, those picks have such strong value that the profit is big. And when you look at specifically player props, you look at the MLB 11-20, but you can still see that we're making money again because these guys are delivering quality value picks. We have 37-36, but again, some of the profit $1,000. So we're up basically 2,000. So good stuff coming from the team. 11-6 on NFL. Let's see, 15-10 on college football. So a lot of room to grow, but we are off to the type of start that we want. So now with that said, let's move into our MLB picks. John and Jake have a few for the crew today, and we can start with whatever you guys want.
Let's get John started off with his game picks first.
Cool.
All right, I'll go first then, since Jake says I should go first.
Seniority. John's seniority. I'll give him that.
So our first pick is actually not a model pick. We are going against the model here, and this is why it's important to tune in. Yeah, so this is why it's important to tune into the show and hear kind of the human element of these plays. Because just because we have value on it on the website doesn't necessarily mean we're going to play it. So I actually like the Diamondbacks on the money line, minus 145 against the Giants tonight. The best value you can find is on Barstool. So Zach Gallen's going. He's a legit Cy Young contender. I know he's really struggled in a few of his last outings, but his most recent outing, he was coming off, I believe it was his first career complete game. So it's very understandable why he was off in his last outing. And he's had 6 days since his last outing now. So I think he should be fine. And he's back home where he's been much better on the season. He has 2 quality starts in 2 starts against the Giants this season. Alex Cobb is expected to oppose Gallen here. He's made one start in his last 16 days. So who knows how well he'll perform, let alone how deep he can get in the game, because you're not able to throw as many pitches when you're just sitting around. I'm assuming he's thrown some bullpens, but you don't throw 50, 75 pitch bullpens to stay stretched out.
Right.
This is also a weird 2-game series to finish out the matchups between these two teams. The Giants are actually up 6-5 in the head-to-head, but they're 1-3 on the road. And this is also somewhat important because if these two teams end up tied at the end of the regular season, then it goes to head-to-head matchup for the tiebreaker. So whoever win, if the Giants just have to win one game here, and all of a sudden, if they're tied with the D-backs, it's actually one game above them. This is very important. But these two teams are trending in complete opposite directions. The D-backs are 15-11 in the last 30 games and 11-4 at home. The Giants are 12-15 in the last 30 days and 4-11 on the road. So that's my first play for the day. I guess I'll go with the second one as well. This one's actually a model pick. So we have a lot of value on the Dodgers on the money line, and I'm parlaying it with the Rays on the money line. It gets you plus 109 on DraftKings. So we have a lot of value on the Dodgers here on the site as well. Actually enough for an A pick, but we don't really send out A picks when we get to, say, a -245 range, just because it's usually not worth it straight up. So we're going to parlay it with the Rays in the money line, which we also have a little bit of value in the model. Honestly, Taj Bradley hasn't been great overall this season, but I do think he'll have success tonight because he's a massive strikeout pitcher. The Angels strike out a lot, and he's finally at home while the Angels are traveling all the way across the country for this game. Patrick Sandoval is opposing him. He's 1-5 with a 5.08 ERA in his last 7 starts, but most importantly, he doesn't get deep into games. So that means the Angels' 28th ranked bullpen is going to have a lot of innings to fill, 4, maybe 5 innings to fill. Meanwhile, the Rays bullpen is ranked first and had, a 37-inning scoreless streak heading into that Orioles series. And then on the other side, we have Miguel Diaz for the Tigers opening for either Joey Wentz or Alex Faedo. Not really sure. But on the other side, we have Ryan Pepiot for the Dodgers, and he's been really good this season. Honestly, his last outing, he had 4 earned runs and 6 innings pitched. Not his sharpest, but that just makes me think that he got it out of the way, and he's going to be back to himself this season. Dodgers bullpen also ranked 2nd in the last 30 days. The Tigers ranked 23rd. So I really like that parlay together. It's mainly on the bullpens there.
Right. All right. I mean, we like that, a little parlay. We've been getting a little comfortable with parlays here. I like it. We're stepping out of our comfort zone. I'm going to throw it to Jake for 2 player props that we also like today in the MLB.
Yeah, so I have Drew Rom over 1.5 walks. Get that at -185 on DraftKings. Rom was a Orioles prospect traded to St. Louis in that Jack Flaherty trade, and you see he's made 5 career starts, and 4 of those 5 games he's had 2 or more walks. You combine that with the Brewers having the 3rd highest walk rate in the majors, and if you look back at Rom's minor league stats, in 25 starts, 19 of those 25 starts he's walked 2 or more. That's 76%. If you look at the -185 line, that's 65%. So you get 11% value just on that basic math right there. The problem is some of these sites like DraftKings and FanDuel, they don't take into the minor league stats quite enough. And so I've had good success betting on these prospects who are just coming up, fading them a little. So I like this here, especially because the Brewers walk a ton.
Right. Yeah. So good value there that the model likes to take into account. So does Jake. One more player prop from him before we move over to college football. And continue to ask your questions in the chat. We're going to send the boys in there too.
Another rookie here, Logan Allen, over 4.5 strikeouts. I was surprised his line was here. But then, and if you look at his road stats, his over 4.5 strikeouts is hit in 8 of his 12 road starts. That's 75%. And then if you also combine that with the Kansas City, they're right in the middle of the league in terms of strikeouts. And then they're like 13th in strikeout rate. But then over the last 3 games, they have the lowest strikeout rate, but they haven't faced lefties. They have the 4th worst OPS against lefties. And the one game that they did face a lefty, Framber Valdez had 5 strikeouts, went 7 innings. They really don't hit lefties. They have they've just been terrible against lefties. They hit JP France hard. Kyle Quantrill isn't really a strikeout pitcher, and France isn't really a strikeout pitcher. So it's a little misleading that
Valdez isn't even really either. If
Valdez isn't either. So 5 strikeouts for him. They probably hit his line right there. It's probably 4.5, 5 right there. And Logan Allen is a strikeout pitcher, and he's a lefty. So combine that with Kansas City being bad against lefties and having a decent strikeout rate, I like the over 4.5 here. And -115, that's pretty good value. Right. I think the model has them in like 5.2 strikeouts, 5.1. So there's some value in the model as well.
Absolutely. Love the value. Love when the model agrees. All right. I'm going to send John into the chat. I saw a ton of MLB questions, so you can go get busy in there. I'm going to bring in Steven and Derek. We're going to move into college football, talking about the Heisman odds a little bit. This is an interesting conversation, because there are a few players and quarterbacks, if you like their value, that we want you to be able to attack now. But this is just in general such an interesting year with so many contenders and so many contenders in the same conference, beating each other up for this award. So we are not as high on Caleb Williams. We do like Michael Penix, Shedeur Sanders, who's just fun to talk about. We have some insight there. But Jake and Steven, I'll let you guys get into that.
Yeah, Steven.
Yeah.
A little
So Jake is a phenomenal NFL draft better, and he does that because he tracks these players and these kind of odds all during the regular season, and I'm trying to catch on with him and take credit for his work. So this is my effort to do that. I also was going to do the next layer of taking off the shirt and exposing my back tattoo with the Raven, but I was advised by HR not to do that. But
it's a little excessive.
Find me on OnlyFans. Maybe you can find me on OnlyFans. I have a pretty good count there. Anyway, so I was looking into this and seeing if we were talking about scenarios, and I figured even though that our simulations don't run Heisman Trophy simulations, we technically don't even run college football playoff simulations because it's not an objective outcome-based seeding of the top 4. But we can use our simulation percentages for upcoming games to analyze good value in the odds. So if you look at my screen, so Caleb Williams, we all know Heisman. Besides Archie Griffin, no one wins twice, and so we think the only way all these quarterbacks are putting up astounding stats. So under the assumption that it's not going to be a clear statistical edge for anyone, Caleb Williams, the only way he could possibly repeat, given the history of the award, is definitely winning at Colorado, definitely winning at Notre Dame because Sam Hartman's another contender, definitely winning versus Washington and Penix. So these are the sim percentages we have for USC in those games. So the probability of winning all 3, and if you remember your math classes, multiply these by each other, and that's the probability of it happening, is 22%, which is interestingly is basically exactly where his plus 380 odds imply. If you were to add the reality where he probably has to go undefeated, Caleb, then you take that 22%, multiply that by winning all the other games, which is probably around 90%, and then you probably end up right where the odds makers would have this. So this is what we think. If you think Caleb's going to do this, then yeah, but I don't think it's likely. Shedeur Sanders is awesome, and I think that the fact that he has so much hype and such a great story that all he has to do, if he beats Oregon and USC, so Oregon this weekend without Travis Hunter, that only helps his cause, and not on actual chance of winning, but in terms of momentum and storyline. If he beats Oregon and USC in our sims, we actually give Colorado only around a 23% chance of both. Comes down to a 5% chance of him doing that. If he does that, I think that carries him to the Heisman, even if he loses to Utah late. By then, people have made up their minds. That's one scenario. The other scenario that I say is a little more complicated, but if he doesn't lose both, Oregon, USC, 41% chance that he wins at least one of those. He beats Penix head-to-head. Caleb loses once, loses one of these games. Notre Dame loses to USC, so Hartman doesn't win out. They don't lose. The Colorado State game is a close game against as heavy favorites. They don't lose any games where they're heavy favorites. And they beat Utah to salvage because they didn't beat both of these games at the end of the year. That's around a 1% chance. But you add that 1% scenario to this 5% scenario, you got 6% scenario, this plus 1,800 odds right around there. Again, not a good value, but I think we've done a pretty good job of reverse engineering. So it's up to you, the people out there, and thinking, oh, this is guaranteed, or this. So if someone out there says, well, he's going to clobber Utah, then then you can say, yeah, you got Shador's value there. The reason why I liked Penix is, and lots of people, I think, and Jacob would agree, who knows stuff better than me, is his numbers are not only ridiculous, but if he beats USC 45%, he wins either the Utah or the Oregon game, 88% chance that he wins at least one of those. And no one else on that board, the Hartman, Daniels, and LSU,
Jordan
Travis, I always forget, and Quinn Ewers, none of them runs the table in impressive fashion. Then you still have like a 36% chance of that happening, and that's way more value at plus 550. So that's why Penix is my choice at this moment as the best value. But Jake is a much more astute money management way of handling stuff. He's not all in like I am on this. So
no, I like Penix. So if you go back to the chart with all the odds, let's see, right here you go. I think Penix has the best value at plus 550, especially since he has a huge head start in passing touchdowns and passing yards over almost everyone on the list and everyone in the country. If you had $100 to give me, I put $50 on Penix. I'd put $25 on Jordan Travis, and I would do that right now because if FSU beats Clemson, which we have them winning 52% of the time, that's going to go to plus 800. Stephen and I just think that's going to be around plus 800, plus 1,000, because they're above 60% or more to win every single game in the rest of the season besides Clemson. So they have a good chance of winning out if they beat Clemson. So I'd get that at plus 1,500 right now. I put $25 on that. And then I put $25 on Jaden Daniels just because the SEC West is so weak. He does play at Alabama. Alabama's a mess right now. And at Ole Miss. Ole Miss doesn't look that great. Jackson Dart's okay, but their defense looks all right. But we just saw what Jaden Daniels did against Mississippi State. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they went out. Quinn Ewers, on the other hand, that offense is good, but he's not going to put up major numbers like Michael Penix. He has Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, but Penix has all these other weapons too. Sam Hartman, that Notre Dame offense isn't made to win a Heisman. Maybe you get a Manti Te'o on defense who lights things up, but that offense isn't made for a Heisman winner. Audric Estime has been great. I think he leads the country in rushing yards on that Notre Dame team. Jordan Travis, like I just said, he has a good chance of running the table if he beats Clemson. Shador Sanders is getting beat up. That offensive line is terrible. I'm really impressed with the placement of his throws, with how tough he's been. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little banged up, nicked up, and doesn't play all 12 games this season just because that offensive line's rough. They were missing their center this last game. He's taken some dirty hits. The Colorado State players, that was a little bit of a dirty game. He took some dirty hits. Jaden Daniels, he put up numbers against FSU. So even though they lost that game, he still put up numbers. So if they win out, LSU wins out, I think plus 2,200 is a good value. Then with Bo Nix, I don't think so. Big Cheesy likes Bo Nix this weekend. It's going to be a fun game against Colorado. I think that they win pretty easily against Colorado, especially without Travis Hunter. I don't think Bo Nix has the weapons that Michael Penix has. Mm-hmm. His game isn't like Michael Penix's game. Their offense is a little schemed differently. That they're going to run it a decent amount with Whittington and Bam, or Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving. I love Bucky Irving. He's one of the most fun players to watch, and he has one of the greatest names in all of college football. Mm-hmm. So here I would take Michael Penix, Jordan Travis, and Jaden Daniels. I do like Caleb, but it's just so hard to win the Heisman 2 years in a row. Right. I mean, Tebow couldn't do it, and Tebow arguably should have. He had the better stats that year, but they just don't like giving it to the same guy twice.
Right. Which is fair. You can compare it to the NBA with Embiid winning this year. Jokic would have had to double down to even be close to that. So yeah, I like that advice. So like you said, spread the wealth, sprinkle your money around like Jake would do. So we'll move into some picks. We talked about this before. We've brought this up a few weeks in a row with Jake's stability model that looks at teams who have the advantage or the edge over their
supported by me. Attributed by me.
Yeah.
Under my mentorship and guidance.
Yeah. Whatever.
Okay.
Anyway.
I want to make sure.
But the teams who have the edge in returning production, in quarterback starts, in coaching tenure and talent, they are covering these spreads 8-3-1 through the past 2 weeks. Now, these teams that are 8-3-1 are the ones that not only Jake's stability model likes, but our SportsLine model also likes. Fusion, double agreement, Steven's in agreement with Jake. That's a pretty powerful agreement. So overall, the stability model itself is 17-8-1, but the picks we're suggesting are also 8-3-1. So again, the green asterisk shows the teams or the games that the stability and the SportsLine model agree on. Oklahoma's still a solid bet. It's just not something the SportsLine model has necessarily value on. But this is a great something to screenshot if you're playing in, pick 'em, spread challenges, stuff like that. This is a great, useful slide for you.
And again, this is the tout for the SportsLine subscription is how to use that pick sheet, which is a little weird looking and has a lot of numbers and grades and stuff like that, is essentially come to that page with your own picks from your trusted sources, your own systems, your own models, your own hunches, and see how we agree. May not be a strong A agreement, could be a B, could be a C, but you want to build consensus. You can use it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the pick sheet's invaluable because, like you said, you have if it's not hitting on picks, it could be hitting on team totals. It could be hitting on player props, which I've been good at this year. So there's not just like the A picks, the B picks that you want to look at. You want to come in with picks that someone else is giving out to you, and then use it as a fact checker. So if we have value, use it as a fact checker.
Right. Yep. So we'll move into 2 picks that the model specifically likes, unrelated to the stability model, but New Mexico, UMass under 49.5. And then we also have it over with Liberty FIU over 54.
Yeah, so we're highlighting these not only because there's some strong values in our sims, but also because, our job, you don't need us to talk about Ohio State and Notre Dame or the high profile matchups. And the problem is a lot of the high profile matchups, just like the NFL, the lines get really tight because there's so much knowledge about teams. There's so much attention to those teams. If there's a major injury, it's really hard. If you're not Utah's head coach, it's really hard to hide the status of your, whether a player's going to play in this day and age. You got 24/7 sports, and their message boards all over you. So there's just not a lot of value in a lot of cases. So a lot of times the model detects value because on lesser low profile games. So in this case, I wish we could have done this yesterday. The line keeps creeping down from 50.5 opening down to 49, down to 49.5 where this graphic was made, down to 49 recently. And one factor that's going on in the college football these days are teams that 60% of teams are running significantly fewer plays, over 7 fewer plays a game, and their scoring is significantly down. And so the model likes the under, and you should probably get it now while you can still get it at 49 in some spots. And you might be able to still get it at 49.5 if it's shopping opportunity. But the biggest thing is New Mexico, they averaged 11 points last year. They averaged 14 points right now. So yeah, big percentage improvement, nice 30% improvement, but still really low. And even though UMass has had decent scoring this year, I mean, it's still not great. And last year they were anemic. So the model in college football, there's not a lot of games. So we're still incorporating heavily from stats from last year. And so when you add that, you just get 2 low scoring teams, and we love them to score way above the typically average, but it's still under the line. Now, some people might say, well, their defenses are horrible, and that's why they're scoring higher. And one thing that I do remember from statistics, I did look carefully when I constructed this model, is the correlation between offense and predicting of team totals versus opposing defense. And obviously, and one's own offense is much more of a predictor. So that's why in the model, when we use a significant portion of it is based on last year, combined with the emphasis on the skew towards offense as opposed to opposing defense as much. You get the value on the under. The other game is the Liberty game, right? Which was the over.
Yeah, big time over too.
Yeah.
This is FIU, who they averaged 35 points since switching their quarterback, and they hit 85 points at home.
Yeah, they're one.
Yeah, so I decided to actually write some notes down instead of trying to remember stuff. Yeah. And Jake, you actually know the players.
Yeah. So if you watch FIU's first game, they had -4 passing yards. Grayson James, who was their starter most of last season, he had a rough first game. They made a switch to Keon Jenkins, who's a true freshman. And his last two games, his last two starts, they've averaged 35 points per game. Liberty, their defense isn't that great, but their offense is pretty fun to watch. They have a Tennessee transfer as their quarterback. So like when they had Malik Willis, they had an Auburn transfer. Now they have a Tennessee transfer. They've had some success with these SEC transfers. And their coach, even though their coach Hugh Freeze left for Auburn, they have Coastal Carolina's coach from last year, which is a high-paced offense. And we like Liberty's team total over here, which is a big factor in why we like the over. But I think numbers will be able to score too.
If you want to flash my screen up for a second, Kenzie. Yeah, you can see that our projection for FIU is pretty much actually exactly what the odds imply, a little around 20, just under 21. It really is being fueled by this Liberty projection of nearly 40. So, the Salter, the transfer that Jake was talking about, had 6 TDs his last game. The last game they played combined for 82 total points. FIU's one home game had 85 total points. Last year, Liberty games averaged 58 total points. Home games for FIU averaged 56 total points. So all these numbers are on the over. I didn't validate this before, so let's see what happens. I'm just doing a quality control check, see if FIU. So FIU, their plays are down versus a year ago, but so much of that is skewed from that first week where they were like 27 fewer plays because they were so bad. So that this number, the fact that they're only down 10 from a year ago, is actually shows that they're way up for the last 2 weeks. And Liberty is actually up. Last year, they averaged just under 69 plays, and now they're at over 70. So despite this overall trend for fewer plays with the rule changes, Liberty's a team that's up. So that's what I was looking for, that these two teams, because I like the over, I just want to make sure that these are not two teams with massively fewer plays than past seasons.
Right.
And also, you're to get value in these games and not in these Ohio State Notre Dame games, because all these books are so focused on finding the right data for these big time games. It's these smaller games, it's these Maction games later and on Wednesdays where you're going to find value.
Right. And especially in the player props too. When you watch our Friday show and Jake's feeding out, Duke running back picks that are smashing. So stuff like that. This is where the model comes in handy, because we prioritize those games just as much as those big ones. But this is where we like to find our value. I'm going to answer one of Big Cheesy's questions asking about Northwestern covering against Minnesota, and then we'll head over to NFL.
This is a game I just don't watch at all. I'd rather watch paint dry. I mean, it also depends if Kyle McManus is going to be able to play this game. That's a factor. He left, and their backup quarterback's basically a big running back playing quarterback who can't throw. So if he is banged up, that's a problem. I don't mind even an underplay at 38. I think that could be here.
There's definitely something fishy about the line. I mean, so again, I can't. The data that we receive sometimes for some of the public percentages isn't necessarily updated in real time, but the initial feed for our data is over 90% are betting Minnesota against the spread, and yet the line moved a 1.5 the other direction, the consensus line. So people betting real money with real inside information that the sports books are actually scared of, the smart money, does like Northwestern. So, again, the model opened at Northwestern as we would take Minnesota like the public, but maybe this is a reflection of that quarterback issue.
Right. I see a lot of college football chat or questions in the chat. Jay can certainly continue to answer those. But up here, we're going to move over to the NFL. These are two spreads that so basically on Monday, we look at all the opening lines. We talk about where we see value, where we think that these are going to shift later in the week, where injury reports could affect situations. So these are two games we suggest acting on now, especially the Ravens. The line actually moved in their favor to 7.5 from 8 against the Colts. We thought you should take them at 8. So we really think you should take them at 7.5. We're kind of waiting on that Anthony Richardson situation, but there's a lot of value here on this spread.
Yeah. I just saw someone else from a competing company post their record, so I won't mention them, but the Ravens are positive against the spread when they're this 7.5 or a bit more than a 7-point favorite over a pretty significant sample size. Obviously I'm high in all seriousness. Baltimore's offense, people, I think the national media and bettors are attributing too much of Baltimore's win last week to Joe Burrow being hurt. And not enough people are focusing on what Lamar Jackson and the Ravens did offensively, which was we had one play that you could consider hard, which was the 50-yard bomb to Zay Flowers. Next Gen Stats put that as a 33% chance likelihood. Lamar is second in the league in completion percentage at the moment because unlike last year where we had DeMarcus Robinson, he's not in the league, as our only wide receiver who could catch more than like 2 catches a game. Now we have 4 targets on the field at all times you cannot double team one without leaving one wide open. Zay, Bateman, OBJ, and even OBJ is not available. Nelson Aguilar as a wide receiver 3 is always going to be open, as he caught touchdown last week. And then, of course, Mark Andrews. So we have those. And so Lamar's shown with the 75% completion percentage that he can keep the ball moving there. The Ravens have actually run more than pass, despite the improvement in the passing game, partly because of protecting leads, but also because Gus Edwards, if he had 150 more carries, would be an all-time top 10 yards per carry running back, 0.1 behind Nick Chubb. And Gus is not known as a speedster. So usually on that yards per carry list, it's about guys who break away the 70-yard runs. Gus I think his first 100 carries, he never lost a yard. So he's a guy who runs most of the time right in between the guards in the center, and yet he still gets 5.2 yards per carry. So with the receiving weapons out there, you can't stack the box. So the offense of Baltimore, we're projecting 30 points versus an odds implied 26. Indianapolis's defense, statistically better in 2 games this year, but last year they allowed 30 a game, 25 a game, sorry, and more on the road. And the 20 they allowed Houston, that was more than the odds implied total for Houston. So even though allowing 20 points seems like an improvement, it's not when you consider the competition. Unfortunately for me, Houston stinks, and I thought they'd be good. So yeah, I think Baltimore to put up, over 26 to fuel this spread cover is a good bet because we have Indianapolis at 18 points a game. Richardson plays. Even if he doesn't, Gardner Minshew can certainly execute the offense. So if Minshew isn't, I hope it's like Gardner Minshew's very first NFL appearance, which was a preseason game, week 1, as a rookie for Jacksonville. And I think he started 0 for 13 in that game, if I recall.
I just want to give a little nod to Zay Flowers, who we have really high, if not the highest, in fantasy this week. We see a lot of value with him this week, correct?
Yeah, and fantasy in general, I mean, I know a lot of people hopefully play on CBS Fantasy, but if they haven't been spending $150 a year for it, use our rankings, because this past week, there were 5 quarterbacks that the projection-based rankings recommended as very different than the Fantasy Football Today consensus, including having Geno Smith as number 8, Jared Goff is number 4. Goff finished 5. Smith finished 8. We said to sit Tua, he was like 15th, I believe. We said to start Daniel Jones. He was 10th. In consensus, he was 12th. We said to sit Trevor Lawrence, and he was 25th. So there's some real value in looking at those. And on our Friday shows, we'll be equipped to handle those questions.
Right.
back to the graphic here, the Niners and Giants. The news just came out before the show that Saquon isn't necessarily ruled out, but the line was 10.5.
So the coach was saying, I think it was tongue in cheek, but he was saying that he's not going to say if he's in or out. He's going to be a game time decision. But I mean, it's a sprained ankle on a short week, so I don't know. We're guessing he might not be playing.
I mean, there was a 9.5 early open, moved to 10.5 after Saquon's injury, and still at 10.5. So the people who know stuff are looking at that. I think that the scary thing about this is the sim has a 14-point edge for San Francisco. So obviously, but that's a very large difference for NFL between our sim model and the betting line. And I think it's because of the Thursday night factor. Thursday nights is a poop show. I think I can say that. And so it's often hard. And in San Francisco, they have their own injury concerns, right? Week to week. McCaffrey's getting a huge workload, so maybe they have like the people who decided Breece Hall should run 4 times, to reduce injury risks. Maybe there's some formula in there, and then this is the week that Eli Mitchell gets some run.
Yeah, so Shanahan did say in his press conference that they want to give Elijah Mitchell more touches. So they're going to try to reduce the amount of, usage of McCaffrey. And also Brandon Ayuk, he's injured with a shoulder injury. So he's questionable for this game too.
So the model does factor in short rest, but not as much as the factors that San Francisco averaged 28 at home last year, +5 more than on the road. The Giants can't defend the run. They're allowing 151 at 5.2 yards per carry. They allowed that to Arizona, and Arizona is not exactly known as a great running team.
Right.
And the Niners can do that pretty much better than anyone. And also the Giants, Wink Martindale, God bless him. The few people who tune in week after week know that I'm not the biggest Wink fan because his inability to get sacks and his belief in pressure is nearly as good as a sack, which is not. Giants don't have a single sack this year. So, and they have allowed 5 per game. So you have a vicious Niners pass rush, a non-vicious Giants pass rush, a bad Giants run defense against a great running team. I think if this game was on Sunday, the line would be 14.5. So it all comes down to how much you think Thursday night is a factor.
Right. And speaking of quarterbacks who aren't protected, got a question about the Chargers-Vikings game, which I'm not sure if we have value on the spread. But I do know we like this over, right?
Yeah, that's one of our overplays. I think you have a nice graphic on that as well, don't you?
Over here,
the Chargers. The problem with the Chargers is they play defensive whack-a-mole. So for the last 2 years, they were horrendous against defending the run. They would allow like 160 yards or something, but more importantly, they would allow like almost 5.5 yards per carry. In today's NFL, that's just a horrendous stat. When backs are lucky to be even at 4.5. So they seem to put in a concerted effort. So last year they were outgained by an average of 56 yards per game on the ground, and so what that does is keeps guys like Justin Herbert off the field. So it looks like they've done some stuff to try to shore some of that up, but and so they're only allowing 3.9 yards per carry and 106 yards. But in the process, they are now in completely ridiculously leaky pass defense. I saw a stat, I think Colin Cowherd mentioned it, that they spend more on defense than anybody, and they have arguably the worst pass rush. They have Bosa, they have Khalil Mack, they have, a lot of other, they have Derwin James, they have a bunch of great defensive players. But obviously the Tua game, they allowed 466. And while I say they only allowed 246 last week, that's to Ryan Tannehill. And, and they allowed 10.2 yards per pass attempt to Tannehill. So allowing 246 and 10.2 to Tannehill is sort of like allowing 500 to a good team, right? So in this matchup, the one thing Minnesota can do is pass. They can't run a lick. They have run for
34 yards,
69 more yards than I have. in the NFL this week. So Alexander Madison only has me by around 50 yards. I think you got a decent chance of catching up to him.
So their average is the worst in the league right now after 2 games.
Yeah. So Minnesota, they can pass the ball. We know, and Jordan Addison has had 2 long touchdowns in each of his games. Justin Jefferson, even when he's having fumbles, costly fumbles, is still racking up double-digit catches. And so I think that, and even the guys like Josh Oliver, who they acquired from the Ravens, have helped boost their weapons. So we like Minnesota to score over the 26.5 that the odds imply, which shouldn't surprise anyone given their offense. And then we also, on the flip side, we love the Chargers to score over 27.5. Minnesota can't really stop anyone. Minnesota's defense, they don't have much of they got a decent number of sacks last week, but in week 1 they only sacked Baker 1 time, and Zadarius Smith isn't there anymore. They're kind of rebuilding on the defensive side. They're the defense that made Daniel Jones look like a rock star in the playoffs. So yeah, and Austin Eckler, I think, will be back this week. Not a guarantee, but as we predicted, Josh Kelly wouldn't be able to have any success running the ground, running against Tennessee. So if Eckler is back, then that opens up actually the passing game more than anything. Eckler's not a great running back in terms of yards per carry and production there.
But Minnesota is not good at defending the run because they're giving up the 4th most rushing yards per game at 166 yards. So yeah, that's not good.
So and that could be also the Philadelphia skew, right? When you face Philadelphia, you tend to give up a lot of yards. But either way, we like both offenses that have plenty of success. The line is, we had a strong A value when it opened at 51.5, and it's already been bet up to 54. So the value is rapidly declining.
Yeah.
So maybe the better bet would be team total.
Yeah. Moral of the story, we like the team totals. We like the over in general. Another game we like both team totals is the Lions and the Falcons. The Falcons have an almost disrespectfully low team total line. So we like them to go over that. And we look at this Atlanta defense, which technically is showing improvements, but against who? They haven't really faced anyone competitive necessarily yet to show the true improvement, but we like this game to go over big time.
Yeah, I think Detroit, they averaged 14 more points at home than on the road last year. They averaged 33 last year at home. They scored 31 last week in a bad loss, but still 31 points. David Montgomery might be out, but that could be good if Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie, gets more carries. He's more of a speedster. And Goff, usually has no problem on the fast track. And also on the other side, Atlanta, while they're run first and run heavy, they have Bijan Robinson. They also play out in a dome and a fast track, and they've scored more than people expected the first 2 weeks. So you got in Detroit's defense, Gardner Johnson might be out for the season. Definitely out for this game. He is
out. That's what I was about to say. Gardner Johnson is
out. The defense so far, which made tremendous strides after starting as historically the worst defense for the first half last year, really made strides the second half last year. But this start of this season, the 20 points they allowed at Kansas City was not a real. We all saw that game. Kelsey wasn't there, and Kadarius Toney dropped 3 balls, and the other receiver, Sky Moore, also struggled. So that I don't give them too much credit for that 20 points allowed in Kansas City in week 1. It was a 37 they allowed Geno in Seattle. That's more troubling. So Detroit's defense does not quite look like the team they were in the second half of last year.
Right.
So love the points in both sides.
Yeah. 2 questions here. Steve asking if we still like the Ravens at -8, which we do. That's originally what we thought it was and still liked it there. And then Scott always asking about Brees or Swift, if you want to do some behind the scenes researching there.
So Swift, I brought up on my on Twitter, I think, that I was worried that after looking great in week 1 on a short rest, all the medical science is going to indicate you can't overwork a running back coming off an ACL injury, with 6 days rest. So that was a concern with Brees in week 2, and he ended up with 4 carries. Now, he was upset about that and posted on Twitter. The team should probably tell him in advance, hey, Brees, we're going to put you on a pitch count. But I think that will the message will be loud and clear. And obviously, Zach Wilson was not up to the task of facing a good pass rush like the Patriots. Patriots not as devastating as Dallas, obviously, but still, it is their forte. So we got to figure that Brees will get more carries, and when he gets double-digit carries, he performs. Everyone's going to be excited about DeAndre Swift because of what he did last week. Everybody but maybe Rashad Penny, who's hoping to get carries, or the other one, Gainwell, who wanted to keep that job. But
and Boston Scott.
And Boston Scott. But Scott's used to being number 3 on the
right.
Swift, the problem is he is notorious for jaw-dropping huge games followed by nothing. He's had one game in his career where he had two great games in a row. This one back in 2021, 33 carry, 130-yard game with a 14 carry, 136. Outside of that, you can just see the best. He did okay here with a 64 and 81, but he didn't score. But you see just a lot of. You see a lot of recently. See 144 followed by 56. That's like one of his better events. 62 followed by a 21. 78 followed by a 25. It's not ideal. And the big thing is Tampa Bay, when the first 2 years with Tom Brady, they were one of the greatest run defenses of all time. Then last year, the Tampa Bay offense was so bad and could not run that if Brady didn't pass for 2 first downs at least, the drives were lasting 2 minutes of real time. It was like miss pass, and so the Tampa Bay defense was so gassed that their run defense, kind of fell apart, and they went from historically awesome to just league average. But to start this year, they've been dominant again. As Baker Mayfield, who is not worthy of a number 1 pick, but is still a top 20 quarterback and a very good sleeper and option if you can still get him. If you're worried about Joe Burrow, which you should be because the line moved from 6.5 to 2, or even Anthony Richardson. We had Baker. Baker is a good fantasy option. Anyway, with him actually playing pretty well. The Tampa Bay defense isn't as gassed, so they should be better theoretically from preventing Swift getting these huge long runs. And maybe Philly mixes it up a little bit. And I saw Rashad Penny was actually ranked by our fantasy experts fairly high. So there's some momentum among those who know that Penny is a top 50 fantasy running back. So could be horn in a little bit on
we
Swift.
just got to see if Gainwell is going to play or not, and then that'll kind of determine which one you're going to pick. Because if Gainwell plays, probably be Brees, will probably be who I'll go with.
Now, if in our current rankings, because we're assuming that Gainwell's a stretch, we have Swift clearly ahead of Brees, because Philly, the projection of 25.5 points. The Jets are home dogs to an 0-2 team that can't score because the Jets have an odds implied total of 17. We actually are more optimistic at 17.6. So just the touchdowns by Philly are expected to be more than 50% more than the touchdowns for the Jets. So even if you think Brees is going to get the yardage of Swift, the touchdown, projection for Brees is a quarter of a touchdown, whereas for Swift,
then you have
Swift's is 60% higher touchdown projection.
Mm-hmm.
Was there another question that you had? I think you said it was two or one.
Just was the Ravens spread, which we already addressed. Yeah. We're running a little low on time. I just want to breeze over this Chiefs pick that we like. We like them to cover this spread. Obviously, the Bears defense is just awful. They at least could run the ball last year. They don't even really have that anymore. So we like the spread a lot. The Chiefs, we have projected for 5 sacks, which is also a pretty significant part into the spread as well. But as always, we like the Chiefs team total over. They got the band back together. Mahomes has his boys. I think he's going to be feeling good. So we like them to go over this 30.5 as well.
Yeah, so Kelsey came back, caught a touchdown. Tony and Sky Moore produced, kind of mentally get over that hurdle. And if you're telling me, so we all know the Chiefs are a 30-point per game team. The Bears were the worst defense last year, and one of the worst defense in points allowed, and allowed nearly 5 more on the road, 30 points per game on the road last year. They just gave up 27 to Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay. So, Chicago's defense it doesn't look any better than last year when they are, again, the worst team in the league. Their offense at least could run last year, right? That was the whole story. This year, they can't even run. They went from a team that averaged 177 rushing yards to 94 right now, which pains me because we had Khalil Herbert over 39.5 rushing yards at 35 because they couldn't do anything on the ground. So you have this Kansas City team. Chris Jones is back. Their defense looks like a potential top 10 unit this year as opposed to being their weakness. Coming in against Justin Fields, who just holds on the ball too long, is a little gun shy about running like he did last year because he wants to protect himself. It's all in his head, and you can practically see him thinking out there, thinking he has to force DJ Moore because they just got him, and it just doesn't look right. And again, we think that Chicago isn't going to be on the field very long with very much time possession. Kansas City is just going to have a slightly better than average game, and that's 34, 35 points.
Right.
Yeah, so the pressures go up on the Chiefs whenever Jones is there. Justin Fields, he holds the ball the most out of any quarterback, so that gives him more of an opportunity to get sacked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll move over. We're going to go down south to the games that will be played in the heat. Mm-hmm. Even though the model sometimes doesn't understand, we as humans like to understand that this weather can affect teams. Dolphins are used to playing here. The Broncos are not. I think the Dolphins are averaging way less at home than on the road.
The games are. Yeah, they are. Yeah. So
games,
this is one of those situations where the model weights a lot of things, but heat and humidity isn't necessarily one of the major inputs. Football is known as a winter sport, right? But it's definitely an issue. So here's where we got to look at the careful data. And it's weird to me when I saw the line move up from 47 to 48. I understand that because how can you not with the way that Tua and the Dolphins have started offensively. But last year, their games in Miami averaged 38 total points. On the road, it was 57. So that's a lot of point difference. We actually like Miami to go over their team total slightly. We have 28-point projection over versus 27.5. But we like Denver to come under, and I think Derek found some. I'll let you, Derek, about Denver's offense.
Yeah, so whenever Denver is in Miami, since 2005, when the kickoff temperature is between 80 to 92 degrees, they've been outscored 69 to 19 in those games. Yeah, granted, it was only a 2-game sample size, but my goodness, they got outscored points.
But yeah, so again, the model's not going to go back to 2006 and wait a two-game sample size. But hey, we live down in South Florida. It's hot, and I've grown to love it, and I've gotten used to it. And I go outside for an hour and a half a day. But Russell Wilson doesn't. Right. And then there's the Denver. We also like the Miami against on the spread because the Broncos defense does not look good. They just gave a 35 to Sam Howell. They haven't looked good since they traded Bradley Chubb to Miami, and so that's another factor that Miami could put up points. And then on Denver's side, Miami beat New England last week without their top pass rusher, the young kid from Miami University.
Yeah, Phillips.
Yeah, and he should be back. So that's why we like Denver to come under their 20.5. The Denver, the 26 points or the 33 points that they scored, last week is very misleading because we all saw that Hail Mary. I would say 65% of their games, their offense has been anemic. Mm-hmm. Right? They came up, and that's why we like Miami. Miami's defense has looked good as well.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time here, Steven. Can we go to the next one?
Never. We can keep going.
That's what we have for graphics.
Yeah, Texans Jags, same thing. It's not quite as hot in Jacksonville as it is in Miami, but it's pretty darn hot.
Yeah,
and
we watched
the first
5 Chiefs players go down with cramps, right, Derek? Like in that Jacksonville Heat. Yeah.
Last year, the Jags averaged fewer points at home than on the road because the first 4 home games last year when it was still hot, they averaged 16 per game, including a really ugly loss to the Houston Texans in September. They only they put up 9 points against the Chiefs last week. Yes, we don't have any value on the spread. It's 9.5, and we have it at 10 for Jacksonville. But we only have 1 point value of under. But this is a case where if we were going to build, if you have someone out there has a trend or some other information that really points under, then this is where we would say, oh yeah, we totally agree. That's a side to be on if we're going to be on a side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So look at that. Look at the Heat and the unders. We went through a ton of games, a couple that we have locks on, a couple of leans. Again, Friday is another day that we will start to give you legitimate player prop picks. Those are that we have a good record of so far.
I'm just riding Shaheed.
Yeah,
all Shaheed all night long. As long as that line is under 50.
Right. But as always, continue to reach out to us on Twitter. We're happy to answer your questions all week long, all weekend long. So we look forward to seeing you guys Friday at 11 o'clock. We are going over some props. A lot of success there, so be sure to tune into that. And if not, we'll see you guys Tuesday.